All right, so it's time to get down to the nitty gritty. We're going to get into this exercise just a little bit more and we're going to bridge it over. These steps at this part of the process is actually, if you effectively do it, it's going to take you interdimensional. Welcome back to the precept. Like I said, we're going to take this to the next step. We've got beings here, and I want to get you there. Now, again, I'm just going to preface this by saying, once you open up this door in your mind, you're going to see things that would otherwise scare a person who didn't already know that these entities that you're experiencing are actual soul forces. And they are not to be feared. They are to be, if anything, loved. And that's key, because the things that you're going to see may scare you, but that would be an incorrect emotion, and that would be detrimental to your growth and your success. Don't do it. Learn to love in silence and stillness anything you're going to witness. So as I said, we're taking a plant, we're focusing on it, its aura appears. We're seeing the moonlight. The moonlight opens up another spectrum. Now remember, if you have not watched the prior videos, go back and watch the prior videos, because you don't want to just start from right here. You need to hear my introduction babble. Once you see this light and you see the moonlight around it, and in it, the moonlight shifts your vision and you're staring at this plant. Better yet, you're zoning out on the plant. It's like you're staring right through it, but you are focused on it. You're just going through it in this sense. What's going to happen now is the plant you will see a cloud or a pall around everything else. And from my perspective, it's the auric light that is both on another spectrum and bright by comparison to this earthly, lower, denser light that causes it to seem dark by comparison. And it literally, your entire environment can disappear. And this is very common, part of the process. And then the plant's moving, and you have this, you see this light, you see the plant moving. Let me just stop there and say, that was my first experience. Later on that evening, I took it to another level. Now, I don't have, and I did this with an orchid that I had at home. Now, I did this with a dead orchid where I had this first breakthrough, but I had a living orchid at home. And I almost want to keep my lips zipped about what happened next and skip to the next part. But I feel like if it can happen to me in this order, I should be able to explain it to you in this order. And you should be able to receive it if this is for you. There in front of me, I'm sitting on my bed, and across from me there's an orchid sitting there on the dresser. And it's hanging over, and it was this pink and white orchid flower, and beautiful, and just hanging there. I go through the same process that I had just experienced earlier that day at work. I'm so excited, like I'm charged. Something real, mystically speaking, is happening to me, like firsthand. This is where we're trying to get you. And I went through the process of stilling my mind, having no thoughts, focusing on the plant. The plant's astral light aura began to appear. A pall, by comparison, begins to fill the environment around. So now I'm just seeing this plant beginning to glow. Then, and I'm putting a little moon. This is the technique. This is a little moon, just to stimulate the thoughts, the feelings of having moonlight around and looking through this moonlight. This is important. And while I'm staring at the moonlight, no thoughts, if any thoughts, about the plants from the plant's perspective, and the plant begins to float up and down and around and down. It's up, like it's growing even perpetually, like somehow just seems to keep growing in place. It's like something we can't conceive here, because if it grows up, then it's not here, but somehow it's in perpetual motion up without moving from its first place. And a lot of these things that you'll experience are different because you're in another dimension. And so what you expect to see here, you're not going to see there necessarily. So then I put my focus on the bulb, the flower itself. And of course the plant's glowing. And then it's almost like if you stare at the sun long and you look away and you look back, or if you're just staring at it long term, you'll begin to notice almost like an eclipse sort of start to happen. There'll be like a darkness where it's burned into your retina and it's covering the sun. So now you're staring at the sun, but you're not blinded by the light. Instead, if you move, it's almost like there's this darker circle over the sun from where you had just looked, and it's covering it. Okay, if you need to go look at the sun for a second, use your best judgment. I'm not liable for you burning out your cornea, but I haven't ever burned out my cornea, and I've stared at the sun a lot. But for real. So while you're staring at it, that aura around the plant will begin to become so bright, and it's emerging also from the plant. So now it's easy to see around, but it's coming directly at, so it's covering the plant so that it actually is bright, and you're looking at this bright looking plant, even though you can't tell that what you're looking at is bright light emitting directly towards you like the sun. I know this could be confusing. And then you're going to start to see like this covering, as though you had been staring at the sun right over it because it's so bright. Well, then this light begins to completely eat up. It filled the plant, the orchid, and it became bright as a white flame. It just became brighter and brighter and brighter. Now remember, this is after intensified moments and moments of going deeper and deeper. Now, admittedly, I told you initially, you only need 1 moment, 1 second. Once you have that initial breakthrough that we talked about in the last video, okay, you're on your way. You can self-direct yourself from there. But what you need to know about this part with the orchid and what we're getting ready to talk about, the plant spirit, the life form behind plants, I'll tell you, I did not know what to expect. I had never heard this. It wasn't until later I even heard Steiner talking about this. I would have never imagined this because I would have imagined something way different than what I actually saw that night when I entered into the very soul of that plant, of that orchid. And I was transported through that flame into a room where a man stood before me, the plant spirit. A humanoid being with a skin on him, which was white and pink, like the flower petals, the color of that flower. And his head had this slant downward. And he stood there smiling and still in this light. And I stared at him, holding no thought, going deeper and standing now before him. And I laughed a little bit to myself, and I chuckled because of his beauty and the astonishment of what I'm looking at. And because of that, and the preceding thoughts that began to come out as a result of like what you're seeing, I started to be kicked back out. And as a result, all of a sudden, I'm out of there, and then I'm back where I'm seeing the flame, and then I'm back where there's this covering of darkness right over the plant of a certain type with the darkness of the room around it. And then I see the auric light, and I see it floating, and then my environment comes back into view. Okay? This is sort of the process of going in, and it's consistent. It's like this every time. I sat there and I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It was amazing. On the next video, I'm going to tell you what I did next. And this is the thing that brought me really interdimensional to the point where now I see it all the time. You know, it's not that it's just something, a natural experiment you're going to want to do, especially when you get to this point in your evolution.